Thank you for that auspicious introduction, John. I'll be sure and write you notes next year. Two quick announcements. If you notice in the program, we didn't lose out on the program that John Davis and Jim Wilkie are doing on the Dayton. What we did is move their program to tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning is, every program is about the Dayton, both historical, about current colors. We have some slides that Wendell Huffman has taken about moving the locomotive up to Virginia City.
Restoring it.
Restoring it, okay.
Yeah.
So the entire program tomorrow morning starts at 9 o'clock, and that's completely about the Dayton. So hence the reason for that slight change, and so that's why you have to put up with me a day sooner. And we should also mention that we've all been invited to attend the annual meeting of the Friends of the Nevada State Railroad Museum, and they will convene tonight down at the museum at 6 o'clock. Their annual meeting and brief reception, a chance to see the museum, the Interpretive Center. And Wendell has pulled out from the Nevada State Museum collections the marvelous, it's about 2 foot by 4 foot original oil painting that we think dates back to the 1870s of the locomotive Dayton in its very early livery. And we'll be talking about that tomorrow. So it's on display on an easel behind wire ropes with 2 security guards. So be sure and take a look at that. That's down at the museum tonight. So 6 o'clock this evening, and we're all invited to come down and take advantage of that. Any questions about that? And then we'll do Dayton tomorrow morning starting at 9. Great. It's hard to believe, but it's been 65 years since the Virginia Truckee made its last run on May 31st. Of 1950, 65 years ago. It seemed like a good time to revisit that. That event was marked by a local radio station called KOH, who went aboard the last train. They put a generator inside what is now second number 21, and then snaked cords up and down the train. They interviewed several employees, Major Gordon Sampson, Grover Russell, who else did they talk to? Ed Zimmer. And then they interviewed 4 or 5 passengers aboard the train as to what they thought about that last ride. The radio station then took that back to Reno, and in those days they didn't, of course, have a lot of stock music around, but they did have a stock organist, and I'm a pipe organist, but the organ that you'll hear in this radio broadcast is a good old Hammond B3, and the resident organist plays that in great melodramatic fashion. So this is I bought the original reel-to-reel from a gentleman in the early 70s. The tape is getting kind of brittle, so I sprung this past year and had it re-engineered and converted over to DVD. Well, actually, they're CDs. And so rather than just listen to a half-hour radio program of the history of the B&T and then stepping on board the live last train of the railroad, I picked out a few lantern slides and converted those also. So we have some visuals to look at. So here's the historic radio broadcast. Now this originally would not have been done on tape, but as Wendell reminds me, it would have been on a big a record that's probably about 24 inches in diameter. And some of you may go back far enough to remember records, but you need a turntable about 2 feet in diameter in order to play this. Fortunately, it's now down on a little tiny CD disc so that we can enjoy it today. And this was a half-hour radio show that was broadcast on KOH radio in Reno, Nevada's oldest radio station, and they're still in existence. And it was played just the week after the last run of the B&T. So sit back, relax. If we can catch the lights, we'll enjoy KOA Radio, Reno, the last run of the B&T, May 31st, 1950.
You played the organ.
No, it's not me playing.
The whistle of a Virginia and Truckee Railroad train, sounding for the last time across the sage-covered Nevada desert, a sound that is about to fade into the quiet and silence of history. For today, that whistle will be silenced, the canary-colored passenger cars and the brass-bound engines halted. And after that, time will continue its slow assault on the rails and ties. The desert reclaim its home, and the sagebrush begin its work of covering the tracks. Covering these traces of a past, when 50 trains a day, loaded with the richest silver ore, traveled over this road that by tonight will be deserted. Today, on this May 31st, the Virginia and Truckee makes its last run, and one of the most remarkable, romantic, and exciting railroads in America's history comes to an end. An end to the Bonanza short line that carried the silver of Virginia City, Nevada to the world. The railroad that carried its own weight in silver. The weight of every engine, every car, every tie and switch and rail. And so, we salute the B&T, tell you part of its story, and go aboard the train for the last ride. You see, there was a time not too long ago when Virginia City, Nevada was great. Not a ghost town, but a rollicking metropolis of 40,000 people, sending a stream of silver from our mines that totaled hundreds of millions of dollars. A city that boasted the finest money could buy. Hotels, opera house, mansions, churches, fire engines, her own railroad. Oh, what a railroad, the crookedest in the world. That was one of its boasts. A writer of the time said of the Virginia and Truckee, "It has a manifest improvement on other railroads, saving half the engine power. The improvement consists in laying rails so that an engine, whilst pulling at one end of the train, pushes at the other." Well, that railroad was really crooked. In a 21-mile stretch between Carson and Virginia City, there were curves equal to 17 full circles. Along the Comstock Lode, they called it Sharon's Crooked Railroad, after the man who created it, William Sharon. William Sharon, the representative of the Bank of California in Virginia City, the man and the bank that in 1869 ruled the Comstock. In 1869, Virginia City's big bonanza hadn't been discovered. The mines in operation at that time were lifting low-grade ore for the most part, and the high cost of transportation on the horse and mule-drawn wagons was making the mines unprofitable to operate. Cheaper transportation was needed. Cheaper transportation would give new life to the Comstock. A railroad was needed. A railroad to take the ore to the stamp mills and to return to Virginia City with the enormous amounts of timber that the mines swallowed to brace their cavernous interiors, and that every engine on the Comstock burned for fuel. Timber, yes, and food and machinery and silks and satins and laces and china and whiskey, and all the things that a bustling mining town of 40,000 with money to burn had to have to live the way they wanted to live. So William Sharon called I.E. James, the leading mine surveyor of the district, to his office. And in this important conference, where a whole railroad was to be created, the entire conversation went like this. James entered, and Sharon demanded, "Can you run a railroad from Virginia to the Carson River?" James answered very simply, "Yes." And Sharon said, "Then do it at once." That was the end of the conference. James went out and did it. Such was the way Virginia City people did business. To build a railroad, you need men. And soon there were 1,600 men working down the side of Sun Mountain. Many of them Chinamen who just finished building the Central Pacific. The rails came from Liverpool, England to San Francisco, and two of the first engines, the Virginia and the Carson, were built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works. The Union Iron Works of San Francisco built the three others, the Lyon, the Story, and the Ormsby, named after the three counties that the B&T ran through. And when the line was completed to Gold Hill, near Virginia City, the Lyon was the Crown Point trestle hung with red, white, and blue bunting. William Sharon smiled and waved from the cab of the engine, and the brass band of Gold Hill blared forth. From near nearby Fort Homestead, the cannon General Grant boomed the welcome. And the party was on. Mr. Sharon had provided unlimited beer for the populace and unlimited ice buckets of champagne for the elite. The Comstock had its railroad. The Virginia and Truckee, by reducing the ore hauling rates, gave Comstock business a lift that carried it up to the time of the Big Bonanza. That was in 1873, when two Irish miners in Virginia City, named John W. Mackey and James G. Fair, and two Irish saloon keepers in San Francisco, named James C. Flood and William S. O'Brien, combined their talents and knowledge. The first pair for mining, the latter two for the stock market. And together, they bought the Consolidated Virginia and the California mines in Virginia City. And in the depths of these worthless mines, Jim Fair and his men cut a thin seam of rich ore, less than 1/8 of an inch thick. They followed it through every twist and turn until the tiny vein suddenly widened to 7 feet, and then to 54 feet, and then to 95. Here was the true bonanza, the Big Bonanza. This was perhaps the greatest strike in all the world's history of mining. It produced $190 million in pure bullion. It made the Bonanza Kings, Mackey, Fair, Flood, and O'Brien, the new rulers of the Comstock. And the Virginia and Truckee Railroad carried the Bonanza ore to the world. The V&T now ran from Virginia City down to the mills on the Carson River, to Carson City, past the Bowers Mansion in Franktown, and on into Reno, where it met the Central Pacific. With the Bonanza Kings discovery, V&T business doubled and trebled. Its tracks were jammed with trains, its sidings always filled, its crews on duty 18 hours out of 24. And finally, 52 trains a day were passing over the 21 miles of single track between Virginia City and Carson City. During the first 6 months of 1873, the V&T hauled nearly 250,000 tons of freight. Many nights the office force had to sit up into the wee small hours, counting all the gold coin taken in during the day. Sharon and D.O. Mills and William Ralston of the Bank of California were sharing $100,000 a month in V&T dividends. This was a multi-million-dollar short line, perhaps the greatest short line in the history of railroading. It's been our pleasure to talk to some of the men whose lives have been part of the V&T for decades. Here is Ed Zimmer, Assistant General Manager, Superintendent of Transportation, and Chief Dispatcher. He's been with the V&T since 1907. What have you done on the V&T since you came to work here, Ed?
Well, I've worked in every office on the road outside of Reno. And, I went to Minden in 1907. I worked there for the latter part of 1909, and in January 7, 1910, I went to Franktown. I remained there 17 years. And then I went to Gold Hill, where I closed the Gold Hill office. I was the last agent there. And I almost closed Virginia City, and I was the last operator in Minden.
What do you think about the old railroad coming to an end?
I gave my life to it. I took none of it. And I wasn't of age when I started to work for him, and I'm still with him, so that's that's quite a bit. The only thing I do hate to see it go, and all the rest of us, the boys that we've worked with, we're just one. From the engineers, to the firemen, to the brakemen, to the conductors, who have all got 30 years or better in it. And naturally, your heart's in it.
Naturally, your heart's in it. Well, Ed, what are your plans after the railroad ends?
You know, my life's still on the V&T. I've never been any further than San Francisco. I've never been east, as they call it, but I've never been any further than Elko. So I'm making a little further this time.
Grover Russell is an engineer on the V&T and the oldest man in point of service on the road. How many years?
40 years.
I guess you did a lot of things in those 40 years.
Yes, I kind of a varied career with the V&T. I started out first as an assistant agent at Mound House in 1906. And then I came back to them in 1910 and went to work as a fireman. I was promoted to engineer in 1920. 1922, I took over as engineer of the McKean motor car running between Minden and Reno. A McKean car built in Omaha and carried about 80 passengers, 6-cylinder gas engine. It was, I might say, quite a job to operate it. Quite a different job from a steam engine. Just a engineer and conductor on that thing. Then in 1930, I took over a one-man job of operating what is known as the Canary between Virginia and Carson City. Operated that about 8 years. That and Motor 99, a similar type car.
Why was that car called the Canary?
Painted yellow, the same as the coaches, but as soon as it got here, it was christened the Canary, and the name held on. And in 1938, I came into the store department as purchasing agent and storekeeper. which I held till 1948 when I went back as fireman, relieving short of men and a fireman had been hurt.
You might call your career with the V&T a varied one.
I think it is a very career.
What sort of things were they carrying on the old Virginia run over the mountains when you came to the V&T, Grover?
Well, the food stuff of Virginia and ore out of there for the smellers.
Were they big trains?
Well, 50-ton cars.
Were there any wood burners operating here when you came to Virginia City?
No, the wood burners are gone when I came here. They only had one standing in the shop.
Were there many trains operating here then?
Well, when I first came here, they were operating a local out of Virginia City and a passenger train out of Reno and a motor car passenger service from Carson to Reno and Minden.
A big volume of business even then.
A big volume of business. And quite a few extra trains, freight cattle trains.
Is there an especially interesting experience on the V&T you could remember?
Our tie-up in 36 and 7 was about interesting thing as I could tell you about. After we got stuck in the snow the next morning, we were there all night, and the snow was completely over the top of the cars. We walked right over the top of the cars. You could walk right straight across it.
And you were right there.
Yes, I was in there. We was in there. The fireman and I was on the engine I was on was there 60 hours.
Well, what's happened to all the old rolling stock of the V&T, the old engines and the luxury cars?
Well, I can't give you much of a data on the luxury cars. The cars mostly went to the, you call them luxury cars, they're passenger coaches, and the mail cars went to the picture outfit. I had the pleasure of taking 3 of them to Metro Golden Mayer. It was an interesting trip.
And how do you feel about the Virginian truckee going out of business?
Pretty bad after 40 years.
Yes, just as Virginia City's glory faded into the ruin that now sits crumbling high on a desert mountainside, so the Virginia and Truckee ends its existence today to become simply a memory. But we're going to catch the last moment of reality of this grand old railroad for you while there's still time. Will you join us now as we step aboard the Virginia and Truckee for its last run?
This is Larry Garrity on board the Virginia and Truckee for the last run of Nevada's famous Bonanza short line. I'm standing in the baggage car now, looking out at the bright Nevada morning. It's all sunshine and clear blue sky. We've just moved out of Reno. We're rolling through the Washoe Valley. The panorama in front of me is barbed wire fence right alongside the tracks here, and the black asphalt of South Virginia Road. We must be going about 25 miles an hour because we're keeping up with a big red truck on the right of way of the road. Then there's the green of Truckee Meadows stretching out to the foot of the mountains, completely arrested. Mount Rose, all snow-capped, rises white against the blue sky. The train this morning was made up of 5 cars. One flat car with a yellow tractor on it as its load, a mail car, the baggage car I'm in, and behind me a combination express and passenger car with wooden benches in the forepart of it, red plush coach seats in the rear. And then there's the caboose. Now I'm going to move back to the end of the baggage car and talk to Major Gordon A. Sampson, Vice President and General Manager of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. How are you this morning, Major?
Fine, thank you.
And what are your feelings, Mr. Sampson, as regards this last run of the old B&T?
Well, they're not very much the best. I may as well be frank and say so. None of us welcome this day in the organization of this America's most famous short line railway.
It's a sad occasion all the way around.
That's the way we feel about it, yes.
Major, I noticed when I walked past the engine before climbing on board that old number 27 is pulling this last train this morning. It's a very historic old engine,
It is a
isn't
very
it?
historic locomotive, built to the special specifications of this railway by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1912.
1912.
1912. I say special specifications due to the 18.5 very sharp curves that we used to operate around the mountains between Carson City and Virginia City. And in order to negotiate these curves, the center drivers are what we call blind. That is to say, they have no flange on them, so that they could get around these curves and go off center off the...
They are more than freewheeling, you might say.
Freewheeling, no flange there to hold it to get into the gauge. And that is the locomotive we're using.
Well, number 27's done plenty of ore hauling in her time, I guess.
Oh, yes, in the olden days, many days, and her sister locomotive number 26, which was burned in the roundhouse on May the 1st of this year. She was built in 1907. Therefore, they are sister locomotives, specially built, as I said, for this railway. This locomotive was retired 2 years ago by the Interstate Commerce Commission due to age and the requirement of installation of new tubes, or what we call flues.
I see.
And so she's been laid up in the shops for the last 2 years. A year ago, this month, the Interstate Commerce Commission gave us permission to use it for 1 day to pull a special excursion train of the California-Nevada Railway Historical Society. Then she had to be put back again in the shops and storage. When 26, unfortunately, was burned on the first day of the May, I applied to the Interstate Commerce Commission permission to bring her back on the line so that we could finish our career with a legitimate old friend, a part and parcel of this railway. We've never liked the 5 spot which was purchased by me from the Nevada Copperbelt Railway
And
3
the
years ago.
locomotive, I think.
In 1925, entirely different specifications. She's never looked at home on this little railway, and we didn't want to end up with her. Besides, she's a pretty heavy locomotive. And so, through the gracious consent of Mr. Davison, the director of the Bureau of Boiler Inspection, we have our old faithful friend on the front of this train today, number 27. And she has her big imitation balloon smokestack and the old Indian on top of the bell. And we think that's a more fitting way to terminate our operations after 80 years of very faithful service.
Well, yes, indeed. It's a very wonderful little engine. And ladies and gentlemen, black smoke is pouring from the big balloon smokestack, the old kind of wood burner smokestack that's been fitted up for this last run. As we watch the little locomotive proudly and bravely hauling this string of cars, we can see it on the curves from the open door of the baggage car here. Virginia and Truckee blazoned in white on the little tender. And the sight of the locomotive it's almost startling. It looks like a vision from the past. And Mr. Sampson, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. And I do want to express our appreciation for all the help and cooperation you've given us. Thank you very much, sir. Now we're going to move back further through the door and across the wooden platform over the coupling here into the combined express and passenger car to talk to some of the passengers who are taking this last ride today. And what's your name?
Mrs. Luke Fitzgerald.
Mrs. Luke Fitzgerald.
Yes.
And how long have you been in Nevada here?
Well, 79 years.
79 years.
79 years. I came.
What's the occasion of your trip?
Well, I came to Nevada first to go to Gold Hill when I was 4 months old in 1871. And I have always ridden on the V&T and hoped and enjoyed that I would enjoy the last trip, which I am.
What was your first ride on the V&T, please?
When my father took his family to Gold Hill to live, he built a home and went into business there, and I was only 4 months old. I don't remember that trip. 1871, August the 31st.
You were raised in Gold Hill?
Yes, and raised my own family there.
And you're taking this last trip as a sort of memory journey?
Yes, I am.
What are your impressions of this flight?
Well, I just feel that the people of Nevada are going to regret, as I do today, the passing of the V&T.
Anything more?
No, that's all.
Well, thank you for talking to us, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Sir, what is your name, please?
Robert C. Myers. This is Mrs. Myers with me.
Mrs. Myers, how do you do, Mrs. Myers? What's the occasion of your trip on the Virginia Truckee today?
Well, we found out upon arriving in Reno that this was the last trip, so we got our tickets this morning, and here we are. I'm a rail fan.
And do you belong to a club?
Railway Locomotive Historic Society at headquarters in Harvard University of Massachusetts.
Is this your first ride on the Virginia Truckee?
Yes, it is.
And your last, too, by the way.
I have no doubt about that. I'm sorry to say.
What do you think, what is the attitude of the rail fans toward this closing down of this historic short line?
They don't like it, naturally, being most of them having a tendency towards the study of history of railroads, and I know we all of us hate to see the old timers go because it's the last link with the past, the origin of railroading in general.
Well, thank you very kindly for talking to us. How do you do, sir? What is your name?
How do you do? Gus Bundy.
I beg your pardon?
Gus Bundy.
Gus Bundy.
That's right.
Mr. Bundy, is this your first trip for on the Virginian Truckee?
This is my very first trip in, as far as actual trips are concerned, but we've been watching it for the last 10 years since we have lived in Washoe Valley, and would certainly miss hearing the youngsters shout morning and evening, "There goes the V&T."
Isn't that true? How close to the railroad tracks do you live?
Oh, just about a quarter of a mile.
You have a ranch, I take it?
Yes, we have a small ranch in the valley.
And what are your impressions of the final trip to the Virginian Truckee?
Very pleasant, but at the same time quite sad. As I say, we shall miss it.
Miss the morning trips, the whistle blowing as it passes your ranch?
And the evening trip as it goes back to Reno.
How do you do, sir? What is your name, please?
My name is Father Albert Muller, and I'm from Benicia, California.
And this is your, not your first trip by any means on the Virginia.
No, I know this railroad for over 30 years.
Could you fill us in on some of the background, please?
Well, what I am deeply interested in today is the fact that we're closing one of the most important chapters in the history of this state of Nevada. That we're we're taking away the iron horse who has been so familiar to all along this road.
When was your first trip on the Virginia?
Well, I came here as a young priest 30 years ago. And from that time on, I've been up in Nevada yearly, and I've come to know the whole state, and especially this road on which we are today.
Father, what was the occasion of your first trip? Where did you go?
I was in charge of the parish of Sparks, and I used to come over to Carson City and Virginia City to visit. I like the history of the whole state, in fact of the whole West, and that's why it was deep regret and sorrow that I ride here today for the last time.
Thank you very kindly, Father, for speaking to us. You know, you can't help feeling that something important and very touching is happening now, as the canary-colored cars and the locomotive make this trip for the last time. People alongside the tracks and the automobiles that pass look at the train and smile and wave. You sense that they feel that an old friend is going out of their lives forever. We hope that you've enjoyed hearing voices and sounds from the last run of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. This is Larry Garrity speaking from on board the V&T. And so you've heard voices and sounds from the last run of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. The V&T has been approaching this moment for many years, of course. After 1877, the riches of the Comstock began to fade, and traffic on the V&T started its long decline to end finally on this May 31st in 1950. In 10 years from 1877, the freight received at Virginia City dropped off 86%. That was the speed of the death of this town that once was jammed with people and noise and laughter and riches. There was a resurgence of V&T prosperity at the turn of the century when gold was discovered at Tonopah, Nevada. And the V&T was the only line linking the narrow-gauge Carson and Colorado Railroad with the Southern Pacific lines at Reno. The SP finally built their own connection with the Carson and Colorado, and this source of V&T business ended. And then came the growth of highway competition. Freight went more and more by truck, and passenger traffic almost disappeared. In 1933, Ogden Mills, who had inherited his grandfather D.O. Mills' interest in the V&T, purchased the remaining third from the Sharon estate and became sole owner of the road. Mills operated the V&T more from sentiment than as a business proposition. But when Ogden Mills died in 1937, the V&T passed quickly into receivership. And we've recorded its end for you on this program. The train has now been halted for all time. But for the people of Nevada, and for all those who love the rich history of the West, and for those who delight in railroading and railroad stories, the Virginia and Truckee will remain a pleasant memory, an exciting memory.
This transcribed program originated through the facilities of station KOH, Reno, Nevada. This is NBC, the national broadcasting company.
There's something wonderful about that 1950 broadcast, you know. Obviously, I just picked out a few slides to kind of go with it to reinforce some of the visuals and the audio that we were hearing. But it's a great piece of classic radio broadcasting, I think. And, you know, it just happened only 65 years ago, not very long ago, the last run of the V&T. Any questions, comments, observations, additions? Yes?
And the picture of D.O. Mills, or whoever Mills on the back of the car was another man. Was that President Hoover?
That was Hoover with the V&T.
And you just had the Georgia, whatever, 103, and that was Lucius Beebe's car.
The car, the Georgia Northern 100 was the goalpost sitting in the Carson yards, yes. That was there for about 3 years from 48 to 50. Yes?
When are you going to package this and put it on the market?
I don't, well, let's see, I'd buy a copy, maybe 2 or 3, I don't know. Our radio station KOH is still in existence. I was lucky to be able to buy this in the rights, but they're still in existence, so I don't know. We'd have to approach them and see if, you know, that's even a possibility. Other thoughts? Yes?
Were either of those whistle sounds from the 27, or were they both stock whistles?
I think they were taken off of the 27 because you could hear a little bit of the whistle in the back on a couple of the interviews, and it still seems to be the same whistle. So I assume that was, and they were recording that live, you know, the last half of that on board the train.
Steve?
Yes, Hart?
As you know, I rode the V&T for 3 days a year before that.
Yes.
The sound of that train going over the track is unique. You sure brought back a lot of emotion to me. 66 years later. Thank you.
Yeah, there's no welded rail on the B&T. They're all short lengths. Hart has, he and his dad, as he said, made that trip with Cal, Nevada on May 29th, 1949. And he's been going through his dad's slides as well as the black and white that he has shot. And he asked Mike and I if we'd be interested in a program next year that would get those visuals out, and we could pass around the lantern slides, or we'll get it scanned and put it up here on a PowerPoint. So, Hart, we definitely want to take you up on that for next year. Thank you very much.
I found out since I talked to you, there was one picture up for auction in the report, one black and white. My father took it. The last day of the trip, we were riding the Midland Mixed train. It was taken from the rear platform of the Combine 18. Which is now burned out all to the museum.
Yes.
The first curator of the United States Railroad Museum saw that picture, and he said that is the finest picture of desert railroad he's ever seen. I used to sell copies of it, but he said I no longer do that. But there it is.
So it could be coming to an auction near you. Yeah. Was that subtle? Was that subtle? Yes, thank you so much, man. We appreciate that. Yes, Jack?
Yeah, I rode on the last run, but I stepped all the way.
How old were you?
5.
5? Okay. Well, that's better than the woman who was came to Gold Hill when she was 4 months old. Wasn't that something? Yes?
Eric just asked me to ask you, how many people in this road rode the old B&T?
How many people actually rode the old B&T? 1, 2, 3? 3 folks. Getting smaller and smaller every year. Yeah. Yeah.
I was told last year that I was the only person that this other person knew who ever rode it.
Well, it's getting to be 65 years, so 65 plus 5, you'd be 70 now then, Jack, so getting up there, few and far between. Other comments?
Large bell and bracket on the front of the Yellow Canary. You know which engine that came from?
Let's see, that one was off of the Genoa, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, we do know which one they came off. I don't recall. Was it? They headed off the Columbus, and then it was off the Dayton or the Genoa, and they put that back on when they sold it. But we do know which engine. Yeah. Even though I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know where to look for get that information. Other comments?
What was his question?
His question was, what was the bell that was on the front pilot of the 99 there?
Oh, I noticed that you had gotten a picture of the cowboy on top of the bell.
Yes.
27.
Ken Yo took that picture in the final 3 days. Yeah.
I wondered what ever happened to that cowboy.
It was a child's pull toy, and you can get them at antique stores. You occasionally can see them on eBay. So it was something fanciful they put up in the last days on the B&T. Yep. Samson described it as an Indian, but it actually was a little cowboy. All right, you've been most attentive. Thank you so much. One more question. Okay. Yes?
Well, I do have something to add about, someone asked about the sound in the recording of the locomotive. The whistle is what I believe is a single chime steam whistle, and when I attended the Glenbrook debut at the Nevada State Railroad Museum in May, I looked at the whistle on the 27, and that would be the sound that the whistle on the engine as it is today would sound like. So I believe that is alive, that recording is really what the 27 sounded like.
Certainly is.
Can't argue with authenticity. All right. All righty, so 6 o'clock tonight, if you're interested, to be down at the Nevada State Railroad Museum, be part of the Friends reception, and then we'll be back here tomorrow morning where we'll concentrate on the B&T tape, okay? We'll have a good evening. We'll see you tomorrow.